And like I said, the live is on a delay. Um, so I probably want to look at that. What is happening? Okay. So we are live, or what are we doing now? I'm sorry, people who may be hearing this conversation, but okay. I'm just going to ignore whatever's happening on my browser now. Okay. All righty. Please share this live stream. Sorry about the technical issues. Oh, let me turn that down. Sorry about the technical issues. I am trying to make sure that we are officially live, and it seems to be live even though my browser is doing something different. But welcome to the first installment of Great Lakes Black Authors book tastings. This will be a series of video interviews talking with various authors, discussing topics and books that pertain to those topics. So today we will be talking with Dr. Julius Bailey, who is the author of Racism, Hypocrisy, and Bad Faith, a moral challenge to the America I love. And before I get into a lot of discussion, this is almost like it was prophetic. You were writing it last year, and then here all these events are happening right now that seems to just coincide with this book. And so I was looking at your chapters, and I want to talk about a few of them. But before I get into that, I wanted to read one of your praises or recommendation words from people who read your book. Dr. Cornel West, professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University and author of Race Matters, says Julius Bailey is one of the most original and courageous philosophers of his generation. In this powerful text, we once again see his unique ability to wed his sharp analysis and philosophical acumen to our American contemporary crises. And that is so on point because at the time that he wrote this and he wrote the book, we weren't even in the crisis that we're in now. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to read that so people can see that this book was timely, prophetically timely, Dr. Bailey. So thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me some of your time. You're a good friend of mine, and I'm going to try to keep us on track in discussing things and try not to have us here all day because you and I can talk for hours. So
all day long. For sure. But I thank you for the invitation, and I thank you for always putting authors in front and putting those of us like yourself who work in the community trying to uphold justice as well as making our community a better
place. Okay, so before I get into asking you some questions, I have a few chapters that I want to highlight out of the book. Can you tell us what made you decide to write this book?
Well, I think that, you know, as a philosopher, like part of me is always engaged in the process of thinking, right? And so, and then trying to navigate the classroom. So my last pretty much 4 books, with the exception of my memoir, has been ways in which I engage or can engage in the classroom. So I'm always thinking of pedagogy, right? I'm always thinking of professors and teachers and community leaders who are engaged and at least who intentionally try to engage with balanced conversations and things like that. So that was the impetus, trying to create a pedagogical tool. But then just looking at the world, just trying to understand what does it mean to love America, or what does it mean to have a relationship with a country that quite frankly just don't treat me right. You know what I'm saying? And so I know that, you know, this was another, you know, type of counseling session. We could talk about all my bad girlfriends and stuff, but America is like a bad girlfriend sometimes. You know what I'm saying? It creates a sort of the promise of what love can be, but then when it comes down to you, when it comes down to your needs or your thoughts and the ways in which it can make you and the people that you love better, it seems to be a bit selfish. And I think this type of book is a conversation about the selfishness, the bad faith that America engaged itself in, especially on the political side, right? and especially on needing us, right? Needing us to vote for you, needing us to support you, and then
Mhm.
come back and support us back. So I think it was Teddy Pendergrass who said, "It's so good loving somebody when somebody loves you back." And
Right,
then I
right.
think this type of project is just a way of us looking at how America and America's institutions need our love, but oftentimes don't love us back.
Mm, that's so, and here we are in the midst of that right now. You see so many people, so many politicians from both sides trying to woo us.
Mm,
But from the therapist standpoint, when I deal with couples, there's the ones who just buy you flowers occasionally and get you a little something, and there's the ones who want to get to know you
right,
so that
right,
they can truly court you. And
right.
so yeah, this is what we're seeing right now. Who's bringing me just some weak flowers from the grocery store, and who's actually trying to hear what I need and meet me where in my place of need.
No
So
question, no question.
now in your book, I just want to read off a few of these chapter titles because I'm telling you this is so prophetic. First, your introduction, which is where I want to start our conversation. Indefensible morality, American conservative duplicity in the era of Trump.
Right.
And I want to start there because this is where the conversation has now shifted. So now we've done the riots, we've had the anger, we've had all this, but now the church is trying to speak on what they feel is the appropriate response
Right.
in this era. And so I want to get into that. I also want to talk about I had to like pick which chapters I wanted to talk about.
Right. Right. Right.
Because I mean, chapter one, Trump, the inheritor of the GOP's Southern strategy, just even talking about what that strategy looks like.
Right.
Um, and then, gosh, how do I pick the ones I want? Because the gerrymandering is good, but I'm gonna go to the. We'll come back to, if we have time, the Great Americans here, America and the Gun. Talk about that. But I want to definitely hit on a war of words, politicization of hate speech. That's
Oh, okay.
chapter 5, and then I want to
Okay.
talk about chapter 6 and 7 together, where you talk about the Confederate flag and what
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really means. So that's
Okay.
how I want to direct the conversation. So let's start with the American conservative, the Republican or the Christian right, or whatever they want to call themselves now, and the role that is playing in this Trump era.
Right. Well, I mean, you don't have to go too far as to go for the last, a few days, right? And to go
Mm-hmm.
to, the conversation of Pastor Rod Parsley, the conversation of the brother Giglio,
Mm-hmm.
and how that operates, right? And so I think that, I smiled a little bit, sort of in a cunning way, again, to speak about what it means to have bad faith. When Giglio says that, I'm not talking about white privilege, I'm talking about white blessings, right? And
And
so when
then
I
it
thought
totally
that,
missed it.
I'm like, and he thought he had something, right? I mean, he had some amen, right? And then I'm
Right.
like, well, I guess, that conversation is invoked, kind of against the vicious American legacy of race like ours, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the only way I can understand you thinking that whiteness, that white supremacy is a blessing is by saying blackness is a curse, right? And
Right.
so if I think about that, I'm like, well, that's not necessarily too far removed from what you and Southern evangelicals have always been
Mm-hmm.
within the course of our history. And so there's a sense to which we have to look at the ways in which Trump was created, right? I mean, Trump was created, in 2016 and voted in by almost 80% of white evangelicals, right?
Mm-hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
certainly sort of galvanized around, and he still maintains, arguably, according to sort of Pew Research, he maintains about a 70 or 75% support of white evangelicals even right now, even after all the moral stuff, after all
Right.
the militarization stuff, after
Mm-hmm.
all the sort of the flim flams and all the stuff that he's engaged in, after
Right.
all of that, the Christian right is still behind them. And all we can think about is that I guess, on the political side, we can say, well, the abortion conversation, obviously a conversation against gay rights, right? I mean, Trump, he promotes that, and then obviously guns, right? So that's another piece, right? So I think sort of that triad from a political side is
Right.
what the religious right engages in. But I think what is clear with Giglio's piece, what is clear with Rod Parsley's piece, is that what we're dealing with is a conversation around the upliftment and the sort of the galvanization around whiteness. And I think that's pretty clear. And I think there's a Southern strategy that we talked about in chapter 1, mixed with what we talk about in terms of how Trump was created in the intro, speaks to an America that's trying to have a voice that galvanizes and protects whiteness up against what it sees as an invasion of Mexicans, an invasion of Muslims, an invasion of sort of culture wars. And America is afraid of that. White America is afraid of that.
Yeah, right.
And the Southern strategy, as we know, from the 60s, that also, I argue, even extends to Reconstruction, is a strategy that Barry Goldwater and Nixon invoked in the 60s to sort of tap into that sort of white fragility, right? As the brother that wrote the book talked about, it's the conversation around I don't want to be ostracized. I want to make America white again, right? I want to make the supremacy and the blessings of whiteness fall down on us. And so you and I obviously can get into the religious history, and those of us in the those of your audience who's listening can kind of track the way in which white evangelical movements come from the sort of this mixture of Southern Baptist and that sort of a pro-slavery type of conversation. All we got to do is look at Ku Klux Klan as an organization and look at the ways in which its Christianity was rooted from, this sort of the white evangelical moves. We look at those who were beating and kicking Black folk who were peaceful protesting on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? Those were your Southern evangelicals, right? And so we have to be honest about this and say, listen, how can we, as Christians, not pay attention to the fact that it's not that we're arguing about Jesus. Right. It's not that we're arguing about salvation, right? Because Rod Parsley has been very, very, very sort of popular among Black Christians, brown Christians, international Christians, right? Because he's talking about salvation. He's talking about that. But at the same time, the other day, he says, well, wait a minute, listen, there are people who do bad stuff, what I'm saying? But that don't make it racism, people just have bad moral character, right? And so I think that we have to ask ourselves, we have to be careful with Parsley's and his brand of religion. We have to be careful with Giglio. I mean, he's popular among young people across the country, which is why the interview that he had with the brother from Chick-fil-A, right? And Lecrae becomes a very interesting kind of coming together, right? Lecrae, who was kind of pushed aside by the evangelicals not that long ago, now becomes part of this fold between Giglio and the Chick-fil-A folk. And I'm sitting up here thinking, what is really at play here? What's at work? And so I think that's something. Right. Yeah. And so I think in some chapter 1 and the intro is trying to get us to understand the political shifts, the moral majority that created a Ronald Reagan, right? And say, listen, how can a Ronald Reagan, who folk thought was just an actor, cool kind of dude, the same way that folk thought Trump, right? I mean, every rapper has got a picture of Trump in the 1990s and 20s. They wanted to be like Trump. Actors have pictures of Trump. Trump becomes a popular iconic figure until now. So what is it about a moral majority? What is it about a sort of a Southern strategy that creates a Trump that then taps into the worst of who we are? And I think that is where we have to pay attention.
Right. I think, like you said, there's the political part that the church has been playing all this time. And hiding behind theology,
Yes. Yes.
hiding behind theology to protect political privileges. And until that discussion gets truly opened up, I think we're just in, what is the is it gas? It's called gaslighting. It's just, we're
Yeah.
pretending to have these conversations about race within the church and healing, but it's really not moving forward. It's just to pacify and to quiet things down and get us moving forward so we can maintain this democracy, this capitalism that
Right.
this country has, benefited from for so long.
Yeah, and I think that's why the whole thing with the Kathy brother from Chick-fil-A is going to become interesting. How is he going to move forward, right? I mean, we know his problems with the gay and lesbian community, right? We know
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A it don't get down with our same gender loving folk, but we also know that Kanye. He likes Chick-fil-A. He got a whole song, about Chick-fil-A, right? So the conversation is, where does Dan Cathy move, right? He's down there in Atlanta at a time in which Atlanta now is going through its stuff, right? With the police, with racial issues in a state like Georgia, where sisters like Stacey Abrams is trying to push the state forward, forward. Is Dan Cathy going to be a part of that movement, or is he just going to sell chicken to the black folk, right? Is he going? I did hear he does have a store over around Morehouse. I ain't been down there to see it yet, but that might be the only store in the hood in America, right?
Oh, wow.
And so the question becomes, Dan, okay, you're down with Black Lives Matters now. You got a few black people who work for you. Every Chick-fil-A that I go, I don't see but one black person a shift, but that's just my thing. Maybe they had the day off.
They might have two.
Right, right. You talk to it, sure. But now he has to put the money where his mouth is. But it's not just Dan Cathy, right? It's not just him. It's all these corporatized posturing that's going on right now, right? And I'm not saying they're insincere. Yeah. I'm just saying that on its face, without engagement at an equity level,
right?
Then all we doing is pomp and circumstance, and Shakespeare has already told us it ain't doing nothing, right? It's just sound and symbols, right?
Yeah.
And so we'll see, we'll see how many black Chick-fil-A, franchisees you got. We'll see how many more you invest in urban communities. The way McDonald's, the way your boy Johnson hooked up with Starbucks and did in black communities, right? So I think now, like Chick-fil-A, like a third ranked, the restaurant in America behind those two, right? So now with that type of elevation, with all this power, with all this with all this power comes responsibility. And so Dan Cathy, Giglio, and sort of his passion movement of young religious folk. I haven't been invited to speak to one of those churches yet, but I don't know. I don't know if I would or not. But Giglio, I don't know. I ain't gonna talk that because I know some people watching this might be, a part of that Giglio passion, ministry movement. But I just know that if our ministries, white, black, brown, or different, are not engaged with this question of white supremacy and the ways in which it disempowers those on the underside of it to create a system of equity, then they aren't really dealing with the religious principle, which is the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. And we have to engage with the poor, the least of these. And if that's not what our ministries are doing, and we're building these big mega churches with all these lights and stuff that Giglio and his crew is doing, Rod Parsley would bring in, I love, all the singers. He'll bring in all the singers and let the black folk pay. Don't even have to pay for some of his conferences. Just come and be a part of it, right? They do that because, again, I don't see anything wrong with that on its face, right? But then the question becomes, where is your heart, brother? Where's your heart? How do you operate within this white supremacist movement? And if, in fact, what you did the other day was who you truly are, now we as Black Christians need to ask ourselves, are we coming to your next conference?
Yeah. And that becomes the cognitive dissonance now that the Black Christians have. Because I like you, I support you, I like the way you preach, I like the words you give. But when it comes to issues of equity, is he standing with you or not? And are you going to keep going there and putting your money into
Right.
sowing a seed into that, or are you going to put it towards those who want to see you free, want to see you live, want to see you prosper in this society?
Right.
So let's go. I'm loving the comments. I'm seeing there's people commenting. And if I see a question, I will pose it. I can't respond to all of the comments, but if you have a question, go ahead and add them in the comment section.
Okay.
So moving towards chapter 5, a war of words, the politicization of hate speech. I'm stumbling over that word this morning.
Right.
What brought on that chapter?
So frankly, that may have been the first chapter that I thought about writing a book, right? And so it was because, so like if we go back to the Racial Realities book, what prompted me to write that book was the murder of Eric Garner on the streets of New York, right? This book was prompted by here on our campus here at Wittenberg University, just understanding the ways in which conservative white voices were having sort of resistance or felt ostracized by more progressive voices, right? And so, there was a few white brothers and sisters who I would hear rumors about them antagonizing some of the black brothers and sisters, and some of the black brothers and sisters, like, how dare they be on this campus? And all the while, as a philosopher and as a professor at a predominantly white school in rural Ohio, I'm thinking it's more of these conservative voiced white students around here, and they need at least a conversation. We can't just constantly just shut them up, because that's how you get to the Dylan Roofs of the world, right? And quite frankly, I'm the kind of loud Negro on campus that I just don't want one of these white boys to come shoot me up, right? And so so the truth is, I wanted to create space for us to have intellectual conversation around what free speech is, what hate speech is, right? How do we navigate this legally? And so I engaged, obviously, in legal conversations and state and federal Supreme Court decisions that affect it. But also, are there areas in which, we need to be careful about automatically jumping to a racist conclusion, right? And one of the stories I tell in that chapter is growing up on the south side of Chicago, in the 80s, like, we used to go down to what now is the area called the University of Illinois Chicago area. And then we called it Jewtown, right? And we called it Jewtown primarily because of the Polishes. We called it Jewtown Polish, and we had the Polishes. And then also they had these stores in which you can go and buy stuff and barter stuff. As a kid, I had no idea that these stores were even, has a historic link to the Jewish textile movement and immigration. I had no idea that these Polish stands were kosher stands and sort of a part of Jewish movements, and that it only after a while in the 20th century, Jews began to move out, and then the neighborhood changed. So quite frankly, as a kid, I was proud. I'm going to Jewtown. I'm going to Jewtown. I'm going to Jewtown.
Right.
Well, it wasn't until later I realized, whoa. Right? There's some historical problems here as associated with that. Even though I operated out of naivete, honestly, I wasn't operating out of racism. Right? You know what I'm saying? And so I knew there were situations like this around the world where conversations came out of naivete, not necessarily out of racism, right? And so I had to create space within this chapter to have conversations for teachers and community leaders and diversity trainers to say, look, we can read chapter 5 of Bailey's book and have both sides feel relatively comfortable engaged. And then we can, see where our wrongs are, where our faults are, where our disregard to history is, and where we have to move forward. So that was sort of my pedagogical gift to the project, that I wanted us to be better teachers, to be better facilitators of ideas, and to allow counter voices to take place and not just be political sycophants and not be able to sort of have balanced conversation.
Yeah, it was interesting last night when I should have been sleeping. I got caught up in a debate. Someone pulled me into a conversation about Aunt Jemima, because that's now part of the conversation. They're saying they're going to remove Aunt Jemima. And there are people who are digging their feet in the ground because they want that image on their pancakes. And a lot of people are pointing out the racism in that. And a white man from Texas got on there and said, wow, all of this hate. Now, I thought when he first wrote that, he was talking about the people who wanted their mammy on the pancakes. But then he went on further to say, I mean, I like the syrup, I like this,
Right.
And someone else pointed out, it's not that he said, I didn't know I was racist for liking the syrup or whatever. And someone pointed out, it's not that you like the syrup that makes it racist, but if you want to defend this, that's racist to defend the use of a mammy, whatever. And I asked him, and he said, oh, wow, that's so hateful. And I asked, is it hateful because because you're told something you don't want to hear? And it seems like that is what hate speech is becoming now. I don't like that your opinion of me, so that's hate speech. And so I think we need to have an operational definition of what hate speech is as we're having these discourses all over about racism and systemic racism, because I think there's an agenda to take away the meanings of all of this stuff and make it all apply to everything. And now, our conversations are cut short.
I teach a class, even right now, actually, I'm teaching a summer school online class on Black film, and I've taught this course the last 3 summers. And in this course of Black film, we engage in everything from blackface to Sambo to even Aunt Jemima, right? And, we show how these stereotypes still persist and how some continue to sort of dance for white folk now, you know what I'm saying? And but we also complicate that. And I think that's what you're saying. We also complicate that. And so I try to get students to interrogate the agency, the freedom that maybe actors like Burt Williams, right, who we know was credited as maybe one of the first Black actors in film, who we also know as the founder of blackface in America, right? Arguing what is it about a Burt Williams, or even obviously our sister Hattie McDaniel, right? Our queen mother, I like to call her, of film. And now Netflix now said we're going to cancel Gone with the Wind. And I mean, dang, right?
I didn't know that.
Right, that just happened the other day, and I'm like, dang, like I get it, I think, but I mean, I look at it this way. Let's be real. White folk love to see happy Negroes. Yeah. I mean, that's just true, right? We know that. And they like them to see us complacent, passive, and, back to the religious piece, in our sort of ham-like cursed condition, you know? Right. And some of us, though, must push back on that and remind them that there's an active part of anti-Black violence, not just this sort of passive part of putting it, I don't know whose rice I'm eating, but there's an active part of Black violence and subjugation that we have to engage ourselves with. So they are quick, many people are quick to say, Black folk, y'all need to get over it, right? Get over slavery, get over all that. But I'm like, wait a minute, you want us to get over slavery, but but you got your panties in a bunch over slave monuments.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So why don't you get over, right?
They got a bunch of wearing masks. The offensiveness of taking that identity or their choice away. Right. And that. But then when it comes to this, they can't understand why we are upset about, how we want to be portrayed as a people. Right. And so I think that's what I mean by hypocrisy, racism, and bad faith. I said, because there's a sense to which we have to be careful in this tearing down movement, or even within the Black community, we have to be careful. I mean, I imagine a mental health counselor like yourself would caution us that, that although tearing down reminders may mean something a little bit, but it does not cancel the trauma, right? Right. And so I think there's work that must be done within and outside of our community. I mean, we're tearing down statues, and I don't mean to sound all professorial, but we're tearing down statues left and right, but we aren't picking up reading and literacy, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we are ridding ourselves of Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, but our internal challenge is the upliftment of Black beauty and Black excellence within our community. Mm-hmm. And so, I remind students, especially Black students, all the time, that white supremacy ideology isn't monopolized by white folk.
I
There's
mean, we internalize and we
Mhm.
fantasize whiteness in the same way that they do. I mean, I think
Ooh-wee.
about the years that I taught hip hop. I used to always say, don't y'all get tired of these, especially these male rappers, but don't y'all get tired of these rappers talk about light skinned, red bone girls and how they the finest girls in the world. And I was like, but at the same time, we got some of our black feminists out there who, I love a lot of them, but they relegate black men as trash, just as a
Mhm.
default position, right? And I'm just like, these are white supremacist positions that we have to sort of navigate through. We have to be careful about. And so I think that when it comes to the stigmatization of black, when it
Mhm.
comes to the way in which we do it ourselves, the tearing down might mean something for us emotionally, but I'm
Right.
just not sure how much it affects us us existentially until we do the internalized work. We do the process of realizing that we are better than the statues, we are better than the history, we are better than that, and that our work needs to be about construction and not just destruction, Sister Rob.
You said a whole word that could be a whole nother discussion for another time about how we internalize white supremacy and promote it.
Mm,
Because you see this all the time of the posts and everything that we say. I'm thinking that sounds like something straight off of a white supremacy propaganda thing, but we will repost it and share, and the self degradation is real. Wendy says she thinks that the removal of these things is a reflection of the internal movement that is going on. But I think to your point, let's not stop there.
right, right, right. I
We
mean, it's
can't
not
just stop at
there's
tearing
nothing.
down the outside stuff.
Right. You have to tearing down is a physical manifestation of something, right? I mean, I always joke. The one thing you might remember when we talked about my belonging book, the last relationship I was in, when she left the house the last day, she tore down this wall painting that we had that had something like, we together make family, right? And she tore it down, right? And my joke, I mean, I was joking out of some sense of hurt because I blew another good relationship. But I was thinking, like, you tearing that down is not going to fix the problem that we had together, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
so again, like us tearing down stuff, I mean, I just don't know. I don't know. I'm not against it. I'm just not sure. But you know what? I'm also real quick. This is Robin. I'm also not as much as I'm not a fan of the sort of the meaningfulness of
Mm-hmm.
tearing down statues. I'm also not a fan of the meaningfulness of sort of these sort of operational sort of, I don't want to call it politically correct, but these sort of ways in which a lot of our companies, businesses, schools are just sort of tapping into Black Lives Matter culture, right? And sort of saying, oh, now, aha, now I get it, as if I
Mm-hmm.
had to see, George Floyd's, getting choked out for me to realize that
Right.
that the police was, sort of corrupt and oftentimes brutal. And so I think about the fact that, and I've told people this before, when we watch them in Minnesota and Chicago and other places kneeling with the protesters, I know some people thought, you applauded to that, but you also applaud to the ones that eat ice cream with the kids in the community and dance and do all the dance videos in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned about what we're talking about right now. How are
Right.
you going to dismantle the systems of violence and brutality that's in your
Mm-hmm.
system?
Yeah.
Don't kneel in front of the cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that because you want to placate violence within your community in that moment. Make sure
That
that
much.
when you go back here, that you're turning in bad cops. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're about the business of creating and fostering a sort of a community relationship
Yes.
among police, yeah, and not just this brute militarized force. The last thing I say about this is that you and I both do this. I go to prisons, right? And so these and God bless them, but these prison correctional officers, a lot of them 19, 22, 24 years old, dealing with primarily, adult Black men, and a lot of these young white men and women are quite frankly in these areas that don't have much going on, right? So if we just do
Yeah.
a triage or sort of an investigation of where our state prisons are, they're in areas in which you have a whole bunch of poor white folk,
Yeah.
right? And so now you have poor white. Here's what I think: you have poor white people acting or sort of role playing as overseers within an institutional structure that devalues Black life. And so when we got police officers saying, I don't think racism exists in law enforcement, I'm like, what do you think is operating within these systems?
Right.
I mean, how do you think this happens? You don't have, I mean, it takes me what? It took me, I mean, I went straight through, but it took me, 6 years. It took me almost 9 years of school to get a PhD. It takes folk, 2 years to get cosmetology license. It takes people, and these officers can go to, to school for 4 or 5 months, right? Get sworn in, and now they have a badge and a gun, and they have to serve the public. I don't necessarily think that they're internally bad folk. And I just think they enter into these systems, right, ill-equipped, mentally, intellectually, socially, and then they enter into these rigid systems that sort of it's very nature is to sort of promote a white supremacy and anti-Black violence, and so they're stuck, right? They're stuck. And even my Black cop friends, I got my dad. The Bailey side of me is a correctional officer within the Chicago Cook County system. I mean, these people have serious. I have friends who are good people, but they get in these systems and they have mental issues. They got problems when because they see so much and so much, especially as it relates to us, that it then turns them. I mean, I got stories, sister, but the reality is that we have to be just as mad at these statues from as you talk about, so we kind of translating into chapter 6 and 7. We got to be just as mad as the history behind those statues as we are about the history behind this fake symbolism that's going on now. Right. If we ain't mad at that, then we ain't doing nothing. Right. And so that's what they call it virtue signaling or political posturing, things like that, right? Al Sharpton said it at the funeral the other day. NFL don't just say, well, we support Black Lives Matters. Give Colin Kaepernick a job.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Show me that you're sorry. Like I grew up Catholic, right? Right? It was one thing to go behind the confession. I'm sorry. But the priest didn't allow you to end it. Yeah. Right. The priest said, now you got to go do some work.
Right.
Now you got to do some Hail Mary, some Our Fathers.
Penance. Yes.
Right. You got to do some penance.
Right. And
where is white penance?
In therapy, we call it the correct and overcorrect. So not only do you correct your behavior, but then you have to overcorrect so that you don't make that mistake again the next time. So not only will I tell you I'm sorry, but I'm going to, if I break something of yours, I'm going to replace it.
Right.
The correct and overcorrect. So where is that in this? We just say, oh, my bad.
Right.
And I'll give it the credit to some of the people who are saying, wow, I didn't hear you the first time. I am sorry, but I hear you now. I saw a lady holding a sign at one of the protests. I'm sorry I didn't hear you the first time, but I hear you now. There are people who are finally like, they can't deny what they've seen with the George Floyd video. And many other times there's plenty of ways to try to explain it away, but this one, to see a man for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
8 minutes, 46 seconds.
No one, when I saw Rush Limbaugh went off about it, I said, oh yeah, now everybody's upset. Like there's no justifying what they're seeing.
But is he though? Is he though? Is Rush Limbaugh really concerned? Right? I don't know the brother's heart, but I know the brother's history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so the thing is, again, I get it. I get in trouble on campus all the time. I used to have a former provost who tell me sometimes, Julius, stop being so hard on well-meaning white people. You know what I'm saying? And I'd be like, come on, provost. Like, they out here posturing and faking. They ain't doing no work, right? So that's why they have this movement, here, and Ibrahim Kendi and others are doing this anti-racist movement, right? It's one thing to say that I'm sorry. It's nothing to do the work, right? And so I think that's what you're saying. And so, even the white evangelicals, even your boy Rod Parsley, he's publicly said, "Oh, we're sorry for racism." right? We're
Yeah.
sorry for slavery. I mean, we're sorry for slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we know, but you still got plantation attitudes with the, with the, up within the church, right? You
Yeah.
still got this
Mm-hmm.
operating. So I don't know how much that anti-racism work is being done,
Right.
but if you and others and my bosses and people on my wonderful campus just
I
want
just
me,
I just acknowledge that he said it. Now I'm not saying that he's, a changed man, because no, I'm just saying I at least recognize the people who will acknowledge wrong
right,
is wrong. Now, what
right.
is he
I
going to
mean,
do to correct it?
we just had something on campus where our athletic department did a run for George, Floyd, and they wanted to raise $8,460, and I was like, what the hell are y'all doing, right? And I'm just like, in my mind. And one of my brothers, one of my students saw, my former students saw it. He called me. I'm like, dude, I never. I was like, listen, even if you give them the most charitable of interpretations, right? They want to do something. Like, why are we investing in the trauma of 846? Right?
Yeah. See, it's distractions. If as long as we create something for you to do, then you won't tear up our city. So, but let's move on from that that issue.
We ain't got no questions. Don't nobody want to ask me nothing.
Wendy, go ahead and put some questions in the comments. We got plenty of people watching and plenty of people sharing it. That's for sure.
I'll pay a lot of money for my classroom. Y'all get a free lecture. Y'all better raise your hand up in here.
Wendy said the good law officials become stuck between a rock and a hard place to them. Either participate, keep your mouth shut, or risk no one having your back and being ostracized. And I could see that. It was funny not funny, but it was interesting to see the two black cops in Atlanta who were fired and brought up on charges, who are now suing the city because they said we did everything by the book.
Right.
We don't see the problem.
Right.
And I think that's where we have to focus. What is this book that you all are complying with?
Yeah, I don't want to speak on that, on the case specifically. Not that I'm a lawyer in it, but I probably have less enthusiasm about this particular case than I have any case. I think that
not the Wendy's shooting. The two black cops that pulled the teens out the car.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought about the Wendy's shooting. Oh, okay.
No, those was two white cops.
They're suing the city for overreach. Yeah, and that I mean, I think that the firing will probably stand. But again, we have to remember all this is public facing, right? Private facing, they're going to get their pension. They're going to continue to get paid. They'll get access. They'll probably be able to be, rehired in another municipality, right? So I mean, that's the sort of the back page to this, right? So it ain't much. I mean, yes, I may not be able to wear the APD, but I'll be in somebody's PD soon if I wanted to, or I'll create my own business because, as we found out just yesterday, neither the president nor the Republican Party wants to be engaged in the process of stopping this stuff from happening again, right? And so I think that those brothers, a lot of them were brothers, right? So again, people always want to argue. I always hear my conservative people tell me, Dr. Bailey, what do you think about black on black crime? This is a black cop that did this to a black person. Like, I don't care. These are people involved in a white racist system. Right. Again, black folk internalize this all the time, right? Yeah. I'm not questioning that, and I'm not. And so the reality is that these people, and quite frankly, they were engaged. They were stressed out. I have a cop friend in Chicago. He was telling me every morning when he came home, he was stressed out. This was tough. It was the toughest day in his whole career. He's been like 15 years as a cop. I get the stress, right? So you got all this going on, but that's again, these are professionals, right? So everybody wants us at one level. Everybody wants us to make these cops heroes, right? Right. So we make them heroes. That means they go beyond, above and beyond. That means they operate above and beyond, and they need to operate beyond reproach. You can't say I'm a hero and I deserve all these accolades, but then when I make a mistake, it's just a mistake. I'm only human. No, you are above human. Yeah. You are a representation of a state. You have been given all the authority, whether you deserve it or not, to of life and death of so many of our people. And you have apparatuses behind you, everything from qualified immunity, everything from Grand B counter. You have all these federal laws that protect you. And don't sit up here and get mad now because you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar. Don't get mad now because, oops, maybe I did too much or I thought it was a gun. Everybody thought it was a gun. Terrence Crutcher, everybody in the whole world saw Terrence Crutcher get assassinated, out of that woman, in the middle of the street. He had no gun. His hands was on the daggone car. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But all they got to do is claim, I thought. Right? That's Graham B. Connor. I thought. So we need to stop that, Sister Rob. We need to stop that. Yeah. And those officers, I don't feel sorry for them. They'll get their money. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Whether they get it, whether they'll get, convicted is a whole nother question. Yeah. The proof is not in the pudding in that sense, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a sense of we all have to temper our emotions when it comes to the criminal justice system. These, ironically, right? You see how quickly these DAs are indicting, right? When 6 months ago they had to go to a grand jury, right? They had to find these grand juries. Mm-hmm. Now they realize, oh, that's right, I can indict. Hell, you could have indicted all these people, but you chose not to. So I mean, maybe that's pushing it forward a little bit. But the reality is, we have to wait to see if these people are convicted. Yeah. I don't feel sorry for them. They'll get their money one way or another, and they'll move on to another business. And meanwhile, Black folk will still have to fight these fights on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. But we have to figure out what is this book that they're speaking of, and how do we dismantle the book? They're doing it by the book. What's the book?
Right. Well, the book, and these books. I mean, that's where it gets to your audience, right? So we have to stay in the streets, right? We have to stay in the streets because no matter how you look at it, these last 14 or more than 14, 18 days now have been monumental in the terms of making movement to federal, state, and local municipalities, right? Mm-hmm. So we've made movement. Let's not act like this is just all pomp and circumstance. Stuff is happening.
Right.
The question now becomes, okay, how much pressure do we put in the voting booths on these individuals? Because this is how the books are written, right? So the books are written locally, right? So are you having conversation with your city councils and your mayor? And are you saying, wait a minute, we don't want, like in the city of Dayton or the city of Columbus, where where over 65 or 70% of the budget of the entire city is public safety. We don't want that, right? This is what defunding means. It means the fact you can't tell me you got a $900 million budget for your city and $400 million is for public safety. That makes no sense, right? Why are these cops getting all this and all these guns and tanks and all this kind of stuff?
They ain't got no books in the classrooms.
It ain't got no books for classrooms. They're gonna say that's a state and federal issue. No, that could be your issue. This is your community.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Invest in your community, right? And I've always been about take them damn cops up out the elementary schools. Mm-hmm. Take them up out of there. Take them up out of there. Some high schools, you may need them. I ain't gonna trip on that. But you take them out of K through 8. You take them out of it. They have no reason to be in there. Put counselors in there. If you want to invest in counselors like yourself. Invest in people to deal with the anger, to deal with the frustration. Because the presence of baton wielding, gun toting, radio carrying law enforcement officers within police is only going to do and reinforce not only trauma and fear, but it's also going to make it's going to distrust.
And you're talking about that's social engineering at its finest there, to have these kids going to school daily in a policed environment. Mm-hmm. Okay. We're gonna move forward to the flag. Chapters 6 and 7. 6, we talk about the origins, intentions, and meanings, the rebel battle flag, and its role in creating a bad faith white identity. That is just loaded. And in chapter 7, we talk about the flag today: pride, heritage, terror, and freedom. Right. What is this obsession? I read a post where historically the Confederacy only lasted about 5 years. And it wasn't was it in your book where you said it wasn't even the official flag?
Right.
So what is this obsession with this Dukes of Hazzard flag?
Well, God bless you, sister. I don't want you to get all negative like that. because I don't want them coming after you up to where you at. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But, the thing is, though, sister, is that, again, I try hard to respect that legacy, right? I try to, because I always try to, in class, I always say, listen, if you chilling in your circumstance one day and you just living your life the way you're living it, however you're living it, and all of a sudden somebody from the outside tries to come in and tells you how to live your life, and you say, I don't want to live my life that way. And then they say, well, if you don't live your life that way, then we're going to come down on you and make you live your life that way. If we look at it just plain like that, people are going to fight back, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to begin thinking, okay, listen, those Southern whites who had a lifestyle, had children, raised families, and did all that, and they understood the world through that prism, right? And so even when your boy, Parsley says, well, all the founding fathers, they owned slaves, but then they gave them up and all that BS he talked about. I think about the very national anthem, Francis Scott Key, right? And so you think about Francis Scott Key and the way we adopted in the 20th century, but his penning of the poem in the 19th century, after the War of 1812, this conversation around how dare Britain try to come back and force us to do anything, right? But Britain was getting his butt kicked by France, right? Napoleon, all that kind of stuff. So they come back to this kind of stuff. So here's the thing. So Francis Scott Key says, I'm going to write this thing because we win, they're retreating. We win this War of 1812. We got this thing happening. He writes this Star Spangled Banner. But then we know that he aligns himself real quickly with President Andrew Jackson, right? And so he becomes a part of Andrew Jackson's cabinet. This is why we have to think about how these symbols affect the history of people like us. Andrew Jackson is the president, maybe one of the poorest presidents since Lincoln. And Andrew Jackson was a broke man who was able to gain access to slaves, then kept bartering and rebartering and building wealth and stature from slaves to eventually he becomes president, brings the slaves to the White House, right? And now slaves become, we already know we had a part of building the White House, but now Andrew Jackson, he brings the slaves to the White House to continue to be slaves or within the manifestation of American culture. I mean, with the American power.
Right.
Francis Scott Key is a part of that cabinet. He's a lawyer in that cabinet.
Wow.
And so you can't tell me that, I remember Andrew Jackson hated immigrants, hated Native Americans, was the intellectual foundation of the Trail of Tears. You can't tell me that we have to somehow forget this history, right? And so the thing is that kneeling for the flag is one thing. I get it, right? All my military friends, my dad, my granddaddy, they're all military folk. If we can do anything right now in June of 2020, can we finally say, okay, the kneeling has nothing to do with the troops? Can we finally just say that, right? If we can get past that, then now we can have this conversation. Why are we valorizing the flag as if the flag is something more than the human?
Yeah.
We can't do that. We have to ask ourselves, and especially the evangelicals of the South, wait a minute, you can't have a flag bigger than your cross.
Exactly.
That makes no sense.
Exactly.
Right? And so the thing is that, we have to really fundamentally engage in that. Now, do I understand? Yes. But here is my problem. In short, my problem is, and it's not deeply intellectual, it's just kind of, I don't get it, hypocrisy. How do you want to uphold the Confederacy flag and then claim that you love America?
Right.
Right. You don't love America. Your granddaddy hated America.
Right.
Your grandparents killed America. Right. So there's a sense to which you were trying to protect your livelihood as slave owners, and not only the owners, But then we know, because you say, well, everybody wasn't slave owners. You're right. But those who were white were able to be slave catchers, were
Yeah.
able to be overseers, were able to rape our women, were
Mm.
able to sort of kill, if allowed to, our women. They were allowed to that under the auspices of whiteness,
Yes.
right?
And so the question becomes, what more does it represent? Because here we having this discussion here in Ohio, as far as at our town fairs and state fairs, whether or not we would allow, and people in Ohio. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is what heritage is Ohio trying to hang on to?
Right.
This Confederate
Right.
flag. So obviously it means more than just for the southern states and maintaining their history. It's something deeper and bigger.
I mean, it's an obsession with, the sort of this sort of racist identity of whiteness. I mean, it's really what it is, right? It's the purification of whiteness and the understanding that whiteness, back to Brother Giglio, Pastor Giglio, that
Mhm.
whiteness is a blessing,
Yeah.
right? And so this Southern whiteness then has to, again, think about it this way. The Southern strategy, both in the Reconstruction and in the 1960s, was linked to this idea of primarily poor, ostracized white folk who
Mm.
felt sort of deracinated or disconnected from the political system, right? And so
Mhm.
that is almost exactly to a symbiosis of what the Confederate flag is. It's a sort of ostracization to an America that envelops it, right? And
Mhm.
then taxes it, and then strips it, and all that kind of thing. So again, we now, right? We now become poor white folk
Right.
real quickly, right?
Mhm.
Land get taken, black folk get access, all this kind of stuff. So now we have to rally around poorness, rally
Mhm.
around the fact that we have a common enemy in the government, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's why we can have conversations around guns and say, no, we need to protect our guns. That's why because we all too, back to your mask situation. These
Mhm.
are the same anti-mask folk,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Outside of people who own businesses, right? They try
Right.
to, but for the most of them, these anti-mask folk are folk who basically work third shift job at a Dairy Queen any day.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
you're talking about people, for the most part, who are trying to hold on to whiteness, Robin, in an America that is becoming more and more less white, more
Mhm.
and more global, and this sort of purification of making America great or white again is becoming less and less of a reality. And so we're going to hold on by dear life. And trust me, Trump is going to get 70 to 80% of that vote again, because they
Mhm.
got to hold on to it, hold on to it. But the reality is that they're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
And that flag, whatever. I mean, the same flag got a flag and a gun and shooting down black folks. So that's why I ain't really paying much attention. But if you want
Right.
to try to tell me that you're doing this because your great great granddaddy died in a war, God bless your great great granddaddy, but your great granddaddy died of a war trying to protect a system that affected my great 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 granddaddy. So don't
Mhm.
sit up here and try to ask for my sympathy.
Right. Right.
God didn't give a damn about us, so we don't give a daggone about that.
Right. Amen. Your friend Raymond Jones said, "Say so." We,
And yeah,
I,
tell me to go to work. I ain't working.
I think that's a good place to probably wrap up this conversation.
Okay.
Because otherwise we'll be talking for the next hour, and I think a good cutoff place is always best, leaving wanting more. But
Yeah.
tell them about your book, where to
Okay.
get that, how people can get in touch with you, because I'm sure people are going to want to get in touch with you after this.
I don't know nobody love me, Robin, but we're gonna try to kind of keep it pulling. Racism, hypocrisy, and bad faith is my newest project. It came out in February of this year. It is by
Mm-hmm.
Broadview Press. Broadview, Broadview. The best way to get access to the book is to go to my website, juliusbailey.com, www.juliusbailey.com, or go to broadviewpress.com. Right now, Broadview has partnered with Black Lives Matter worldwide, as well as the Movement for Black Lives. and we're donating part of our book sales to those two organizations. So if you go through the book, through the publisher, you'll be also supporting the movement for Black Lives, the original Black Lives Matter movement, and the Black Lives Matter Worldwide. But if you go through my website, obviously I can send it to you, I can sign it, stuff like that. I'm cool with you going to Amazon, but as a writer yourself, Amazon kicks our butt. So, I don't get, frankly, I don't get a lot from the books anyway, but I get even less if you go through Amazon. But that's okay. I just want you to have access to the conversation. Do that. Soon, hopefully, we'll be back and I can move around and do some of the book events that were canceled, because of COVID. You were planning something up your way, so hopefully, we can get that back in the summer, the fall. But I just appreciate you. I appreciate your audience. I heard you say we got a lot of people involved, so hopefully they'll come through. I am embarking upon
I was gonna ask you to bring it up. Go ahead.
I am embarking upon a radio show / podcast called Straight No Chaser. You can go to my webpage. You go to my Facebook page, Julius Dion Bailey, Julius Bailey. Like my page, be my friend, and we're gonna start July 5th. So we're gonna probably start with what does the 4th of July mean to the Negro,
right.
And so, but we're gonna enjoy that conversation. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the work that you do personally on behalf of mental health awareness, as well as the connections that you do with the Northeast Black Health Coalition, the work that y'all do. I'm proud to be a part of that organization, and Ivanka and all the rest of them, and Gerald and all the rest of them. I thank the work that you do. I hope to see you soon, sister.
Okay.
I'm get on up there soon, but we'll talk soon.
Okay. I thank you so much for joining me and making the first installment of Book Tasting so awesome. This was a great discussion. Yes, due to COVID, we have postponed the Great Lakes Black Authors Expo and Writers Conference. We postponed it originally to February to move it to Black History Month. We thought that was a God-ordained move for us, but we're not even sure about February. We want to be respectful of what's happening in our society with this pandemic. It is affecting our community worse than anyone else. And so for that reason, we are focusing right now on digitalizing a lot of our platforms, changing some things that we do so that it's available digitally until it is safe to come back as a family and have a conference. So thank you so much. Raymond, I think, is putting in the comments the Straight No Chaser, so people can look you up when that show starts. And make sure you all get this book. Make sure you all book him for speaking and having these discussions. We need to continue these discussions. We need to have discourse. Back in the day, I put up a post about the role of the Black bookstore. And that's where we used to have these discussions. But then the Black bookstores became labeled extremists, and a lot of them were shut down and went out of business. So now our digital platforms is the Black bookstore. We got to keep having these conversations so that we can move the movement forward. Continue to follow us.
On a personal note, you like my beard? You ain't seen me.
You looking sharp there, doctor. Trying to look all grown with the beard. That's
right. Y'all ain't seen me up there in Cleveland without, with my beard. But I'm gonna make it up there. I'm gonna make it up there soon.
Okay, we'll see you soon. Thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned. I will announce when the next book tasting will be. So stay tuned and stay following Great Lakes Black Authors. Thank you.
Thank you.